Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Once again, we're back online, and what a fantastic session we had yesterday with Dr. Abdul Bari. Inshallah, today we will also continue. Apologies for coming on late. Inshallah, obviously we're building ourselves up, and a lot of people. Yesterday we had around 6,000 people viewing us. Inshallah, very, very big thanks to Vodcasts, okay, who are actually giving us this platform to do this. Just to let people know, I was a little bit bored at home, didn't know what to do. I'm going to stuck. So I'm taking social isolation like very seriously, social distancing, all that, taking all the government's advice as best as possible. But the consequence of that is being bored at home, not knowing what to do, how to help. So, with a discussion with Big Brother, who's helping me with the technical side, we decided to come online and provide some space to people so that we can share our opinions, ideas, not too hard on, but relax, so that we can take information, discuss topics and kind of like make it meaningful to our lives now at the moment, whichever way we're spending that time now. So it's very important. So big thanks to everyone who's actually come on and they're texting. Please share the link so that we get more people watching us, and also people can contribute to the discussion today. A lot of things have happened, and what we want to do is all our viewers out there, you are going to make the show. So if you can give us facts, points, arguments, text it to us. You can also call us, and we will take your call. We'll give priority to the calls as well. I've got to say, I've got a fantastic line of guests on my show here today. Both of them I've known since many, many years, and it's really, really great to be reunited online again. Unfortunately, under such circumstances, wish it could have been done in a better circumstances. But however, we are in the situation we are in. More people have lost their lives as well. Numbers are growing. We will try and look at some of those facts very soon. What we want to do today is look at social distancing, if that is working, if that's not working. Unfortunately, I had to cycle to some places. I've seen people still out and about. I've also been following some of the social media. People are still sending messages out or photos out where they're actually socializing, So I'm not really sure if people are taking the message seriously. I spoke to my daughter today. It sounded like she took it very seriously today. We just want to make sure that people take this message really seriously. We've got very good guests on our panel today, so hopefully we'll get their opinions as well. So just to quickly introduce you to our guest, I've got Sister Haseena Zaman here, patiently waiting. She is a co-founder and CEO of the Compassionate Funeral Service that's taking place, and I think she's the only sister that I know that is actually taking on that challenge. And I've got to give her the big thumbs up here for taking that on, because it is a very, very vital service. I've had brothers here from male perspective as well, and it's really, really important that we get a sister female perspective. And obviously when I heard she was the CEO and she's actually basically co-founder of this, I thought, wow, amazing how we as a community are at the forefront now. And we want to utilize that. We want to use our expertise and our professionalism in our communities. We have hidden gems. We need to bring them to the forefront. And, big thanks to Sister Haseena for actually coming on board. I'm sure you're going to motivate other sisters and women out there who've got loads of talents out there, and we just need to bring it to the forefront. So, inshallah, welcome, Sister Haseena. It's been a long time.
Yeah, long time. Just really, really honoured to be able to speak to you, and looking forward to showing whatever's meant to come out.
No, great. Thank you very much. It was a big help. We've also got another very important sister that I've known since times of PYO. I don't know if people know PYO. I'm sure as soon as I put that word out there, some people are going to notice that. Those of us who were young at that time, who had youth workers. So we've got Dr. Halima Begum. She's with us here from Denmark. Really nice of her to take her time out. Her career is within global development, and she's led the UK government aid agency as a senior diplomat. Well, what other better person to get here to give us a cross analysis of what's happening over Europe, and more importantly globally as well. And not that she's got that experience with the aid work as well. I mean, I know aid work is being impacted upon. I myself come back from a charity background, and at the moment we're all thinking about ourselves, which is very important. But we as people, we have individuals. Other people are also dependent on us. I know other people are dependent on me because I continuously donate money to activities in helping people in various different other countries. And now I'm concentrating more in the UK. So there's loads of impact taking place. We can discuss some of those as well. So Sister Halima, welcome on board. And thank you very much for taking the time to come out all the way from Denmark.
Thank you, Abjol Miah. It's so nice to reconnect with you again. I'm essentially trapped in Denmark, I should add, but I have been in isolation for 2 weeks now, and it's been going fine. And it will really be interesting to really do some cross-analysis of how we're responding in the UK and how we're responding in different parts of Europe. It feels fine so far, but I'm looking forward to listening to the discussion as well, because this is very much about us coming together as a community, showing solidarity, whilst at the same time practicing physical distancing. So thank you so much for bringing me on the show.
No, Jazakallah. It's really great to have you on board. Let's go to Sister Haseena. Tell us about yourself. Obviously, you're doing something quite unique with the burial services. Tell us the current status, the challenges that you're facing, because obviously I know time is limited with yourself. You've got other engagements as well, and it's really kind of you to spend some time with us. So let's take you on board very quickly, inshallah.
So, where do I start? So what's happening is that basically our service, we're having to just really virtually narrow down the way we work, because so much of our work is connecting with families, making sure people understand exactly what's going on, and giving very, very clear instructions, and just really supporting people along the way. So it's a very, very niche type of work, and that's been impacted, because even today, for example, I was out arranging a funeral out in Bishop Stortford, and with a very, very elderly lady, and I had full mask on, I had PPE on. So I am not socially distancing in the sense that, but because of my profession, I am out on the ground, if you can call it, doing whatever's required of us as a team. So and I found that very, very difficult to be able to say to the bereaved mother who was just to say, like, physically, I can't come next to you, but you can, she just found it really difficult not to come near me, because it's just, as human beings, we are connectors, we are social, social beings. So from a like a humanistic point of view, day to day, it's really, really difficult. It's very, very difficult to say to the members of the public, right, you can go through that door, not the door. It's almost like, we've all got this sort of some worse than plague going on, and it's just like incredible what we have to do. I realize what we have to do. We've put in lots and lots of measures. Literally, the minute someone comes into our offices, they have to sanitize. When they go out, they have to sanitize. We have to make sure, not that we've just got personal protective clothing, but
are these measures that you put in place, or you've taken advice from elsewhere?
We've taken advice from our trade authorities or trade associations, and also we've taken advice from what the government's saying. So, like, minimum of 5 a gathering. That's the minimum. So it's about how do we, it's that constantly changing. The goalpost is constantly changing around that. And in terms of, it's called human disposal. So in terms of the burial side of it, as I was just speaking to you, somebody just said to me, so how many people are we allowed at the janazah tomorrow? So I'm literally just, changing the goalposts. First it was 5, then each cemetery and crematorium authority, they have their own rule, they have their own rules, own protocol, and there seems to be, and there's nothing that's governing the practice that's going on in terms of social distancing or isolating. It's just still very, 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 I would say, very blurred. It's not clear.
Okay, under normal circumstances, just give us a background how you would provide the service, and especially to the Muslim community, why your service is very, very important, just on the basic level.
So within the Muslim community, part of the Islamic funeral rite is to bury as soon as possible because of the status of the soul. There are whole, beliefs around that. So therefore, we have to bring the person who's passed away, bring them into our care. Before we do that, there's legal registration of the death. So it's a very, very functional, operational, practical level. But at the same time, or simultaneously, we have to support the families who are going through, this shock is possibly for the first time they're experiencing this. They don't know how to navigate this, their way around all the different paperwork or where they have to go, what they have to do, what they have to say, and then on top of that, there's a backdrop of what's going on is that there's the emotional, there's all this emotional landscape that they're finding themselves with.
How do you find it useful being a female professional in this particular area? I mean, mostly it's known that male actually dominate this area. What has been your challenges in this particular service?
It's a really, really interesting question, because I decided that I wasn't going to have a challenges, because I was like done with challenges when I was in my 20s and 30s and my 40s. And so I thought, right, as you get much older, as you don't have to have these challenges, you can actually embrace life fully. And so like, I just don't expect that. What I expect is everyone to be really nice and kind and supportive to me, because that's exactly how I am. And that's how I want to be. Even if I'm not, I want to be called out. So in that sense, I probably have had initial, I've had some stuff from within the Muslim male psyche. I've had some responses, but you know what? I'm not going to give it attention, because I would say 100% of the way I've had such amazing support. And
well,
I can't tell you enough of how much help and support I've got, even if it's people just praying for our service to go well.
Yes. Well, it's a vital service, because obviously, it's the female population also need certain care support, and it's equal. Basically, people from all different backgrounds have to pass away, and they need that service. And it's really, really good to hear and see that we have sisters out there actually providing that service, because I know my female family members would want females to be leading these kind of areas. I know now more and more sisters are becoming brave to come forward, because obviously you have to wash the female bodies and so forth, and men can't do that. So it's really nice that that service is there, and it's great to have you on the show. But I don't know if you've been following today the legislation that was actually put forward I think it was in Parliament, regarding cremation of the bodies that are affected by coronavirus. Obviously, that had an alarm sent through the Muslim community. I'm sure it went sent through the Jewish community as well, and all those who believe that burial is an essential part of their faith and their religious principles. Obviously, there was a lot of lobbying taking place. Were you aware of that, and how did you respond to that as well?
So yeah, I was aware of it. That's for sure, definitely. And in fact, I spoke to Halima yesterday. I contacted her. Was it yesterday or Saturday? And no, it was Saturday morning, because I remember walking from my house all the way into Ilford and having a conversation with her. And then I was just walking in the street, and I remember just having that conversation about this whole case. Yeah, I'm aware of it, and I did actually draw up a solution-based response, because I think as we're working on the grounds, and that's what I have to say my team is focused on, is like looking at solutions. Yeah, bring us problems, let's find a way. So one of the ways that we responded from Compassionate Funerals was to set up an emergency burial planning into place that can happen. And I came up with lots and lots of different solutions that it doesn't have to include at all any form of cremation. You can actually have mass burials. And then we even, sat down and got a ruler out with, okay, let's measure, right? What's the widest somebody is in their shoulders, and let's just like work it out. So we were drawing this all out yesterday and just really planning it out,
Wow.
like you would do, like you would when you design something. And so we sat there, and then till 11 o'clock we got it. It just all kept coming out. And even today I was at a natural burial ground, which is about 26 miles from here, and it's just opposite Stansted Airport. And I thought, alhamdulillah, if the Muslims knew about it, I mean, I took an assistant of mine over there with me just because I just needed some, needed some company, and so I can ask her to do some work while I was traveling there. And she said, you know what, I wouldn't mind coming to, be buried here because it's a beautiful place. But all I'm saying, there are ample resources here. And the fact that someone sat there and drew this piece of legislation out, it actually like horrified me. The fact that they didn't think, that there is a community out there, or a set of communities out there. There's lots. It's not just the Muslims or the Jewish community. There's a lot of Eastern European community who only bury their loved ones. There are lots and lots of Afro-Caribbean and people from the African countries. That is their only option, like the Muslims.
Halima, let me just bring. Halima, let me get yourself in here now. Yeah, what do you think when the government put this proposal for this? How did you feel about this? I mean, did you think the government was actually, like consulting the communities, or were they just gonna go forward with it? I mean, it's good that they brought it forward. We'll talk about the results later on. But what was your gut feeling at that time?
So my gut feeling in general is that we're responding rather slowly in a delayed way and in a very blanket manner, so that because we're not planning the process in a way, thinking quite carefully about what different groups need from us, it's coming across as a blanket approach. And one of the reasons, one of the incentives for me coming onto this show, Abjol, was to talk about the differences between communities and demographics and populations. So though we've heard a lot about the elderly and those that are vulnerable, we're also aware that South Asian communities, Muslim communities, they have different household structures. We also have higher levels of diabetes and underlying health conditions. And it was very important that actually more and more leaders from our communities came forward to talk about that distinctiveness. And of course, Muslim burial is one such example. But what I was actually quite encouraged to see is that although it's coming at you in a blanket manner, in a homogenous manner, lots of those of us who work in health systems in Tower Hamlets or Neom would know that you actually have to work quite hard to get the system to respond to our needs. And if anything, if we as leaders are not jumping into that space very quickly in a timely way, we'll end up receiving services and guidance that is actually homogenous and sometimes a little bit harmful to our needs. So this is a classic example of maybe guidance that came out that has a disproportionate impact on us in different ways. And because we responded in a structured way to negotiate a different outcome, government then responded. So it's really important that we continue to do this, not just in terms of the burial, but also thinking about who our demographics are. So
okay,
if
hold on to that thought. Let's bring Haseena in. Haseena, if the government pursued its direction of cremation, how do you think the Muslim community may have, or even the Jewish community have responded to that? And what kind of impact do you think that would have had on families and services like yourself?
I don't know whether I can fully answer that question, but I do know that there was information that went out in the last couple of days to get people to respond to their local MPs. So that, from what I know, that went on. I did speak to a couple of the MPs through email, and that's how we responded. And then people from the House of Lords contacted me, and they wanted to find out what was going on, what is all of this about. So again, I responded, and so I think they called out. They reached out to the community. Possibly it was like what Halima said. It was a bit like blanket, last minute, which was sad to see. But they still did it, and it did overturn. So it showed that the community got together, and they actually overturned an amendment that could have gone through. And actually, as I speak, my whole body is like feeling,
Yeah.
I don't believe in feeling fear, but I feel like shaky. The fact that we worked as a community, and I'm sorry that I can't say who or what. All I'm saying is that I was called up, I was asked, and I stayed up with my team, and responded. And I think by doing that, it shows that the community responded in a solidarity way, and we made a difference. And that's what this is about. I know it was last minute, but maybe this is what it took. It took something like the coronavirus to do something like this for us, and it shows us lots and lots of gaps in the way we are being called. Because even as a small, tiny, I keep saying this, I'm not sure we are, but even as a small service provider, to think nationally. It's not something that we're used to do. We're not used to thinking nationally. When I mean nationally, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland. It's for all of the whole of the nation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I want to thank all those who are watching us and the whole community, because on yesterday's discussion, there was a lot of discussions around what the communities are doing, the lobbying, like emailing and sending letters to the MPs and that. And it shows and it proves that, look, even when the government is firefighting, if the communities get together and they respond and they use the right mechanism, then they can make a difference. And I think it's really, really positive today that in Parliament today, they've actually conceded in moving forward in the proposal or plans that they had. And they did take those emergency measures to kind of consult with the communities. And also the communities and professionals like yourselves were available to provide that stance and position, because this is very important, because end of the day, from a high risk kind of category, this probably isn't the biggest agenda. For them, it's about preserving the majority, making sure the disease doesn't spread to other people. They're not really interested in, rituals and, what may be preferable by faith or by custom or tradition. So they've got a totally different strategy based on their agenda, which is to save lives and to not the greater society not to be harmed. And for them to concede in this and listen to the communities, and I think this is a lesson for the government, because that's what they need to do. We have expertise within ourselves, within various different all communities got their expertise. They just need to use the mechanism. Instead of firefighting, we'll talk about a little bit later on, doing this kind of approach, and also people responding. Some people say, oh, what's the worth us signing a petition or sending a letter to the email, but it makes a difference. And these are the mechanisms that we have in place. I want to come back to Sister Haseena. You mentioned something about natural burying. What is natural burying?
So it's natural. There's a number of natural burial sites up and down the country, and it's a movement that started. Well, actually, it's probably the most ancient movement, but there's been a revival of this service up and down the country, and it's actually very, very close to Islamic burial. So it's where you're burying, your loved one in a biodegradable. So we do shroud. So often it's in a biodegradable coffin or biodegradable some type of material. It doesn't have to be always wicker. It can be cardboard. And there's lots and lots of high technology coming out and different options now. So it's basically where there is no headstone. There is a marker, and that marker is usually made out of, again, natural elements like in wood, and once it biodegrades, that you can go and do it, but there's no plastic there, there's no headstone, so it's very much in keeping with nature and sustainability. So a lot of the sort of main municipal cemeteries have moved or tagged onto it and created areas, but they don't push it because people don't know. People think that it's a bit funny or weird, but it's not actually. It's cool.
Well, one of my friends was actually buried in that way, and I was invited to go along. And I kind of, in a positive way, it was an experience for me, because it's in the countryside, it's very natural. That's the way he wanted to be buried. That's the first time I experienced that as well. And I'm just wondering why is it popular within the Muslim communities? I thought we should be friendly with the environment. We should be part of nature. Are there any boundaries or barriers here? I mean, is there anything that's actually stopping the Muslim? Is it cheap or expensive?
It's actually very, very affordable. Number one, and you've already mentioned some of the advantages around natural burial, like it's a place in a beautiful place. But it's about positioning. It's when you go to a funeral director, they will go and suggest where the person should be buried. So that's one suggestion. Often family members want to go to certain places where they've got other family members. So there's a relationship with that particular existing cemetery or grave. So there's some factors. It's not really simple. It's really not simple. There's some complex decision making that happen. But I have to say is that I think as Muslims that we have to go to a non-Muslim natural burial to find out, or like yourself, to understand that. But we definitely position it, and when I mean position it, we suggest it to to Muslims, and a lot of people have been taken out. I think there's this concept or belief, I would say, that's been pushed around amongst Muslim leaders, particularly within the end of life spectrum, where, as Muslims, we should be buried with Muslims. There's that going on. So then that's not an option, because other people, a Muslim would often may think that, well, actually, I don't want to be buried with non-Muslims. So, all of these really, really need to be pulled out, pulled apart. And because I asked, well, where is the ulama on it? Where is the hukum on it? Where is the evidence on it? Just do not come to me and make all this up. I want to know. And unless someone says to me, well, this and that.
I'm interested to find out now. So let's say the victims of coronavirus, I mean, is there a process, a procedure, and how they're going to be buried, or is there any requirements in the process how they are buried as well?
Well, once again, it's like as I was on this interview with yourself, I've just listened to some more stuff, but I haven't read it yet. But from what I understand, the coronavirus dies anywhere between 26 hours and 48 hours after death in terms of the body. So the body is, and they're allowing different forms of cleansing and preparation. So in terms of preparing the body for someone who's died from the virus, and it's been, that time has passed, they're actually virus free, and one can go ahead and do the wash or preparation. And but again, there's a lot of information that's going around online saying that you just do tayammum, which is a dry ablution. You don't have to unseal this person. You don't have to do anything. And I think there's a lot of scaremongering going on, because I just think that I don't buy that. I just if so-called the professionals and the researchers are saying this is where we're at, we don't actually know very much about it. But in terms of what happened with AIDS again, the way we dealt with AIDS. I mean, I wasn't around as a funeral director. I was probably working with yourself around that time. You could still work with people who died with AIDS in terms of and look after them. So there are some strict protocol, but I have to say each funeral director are taking their own policies into their own hands. Some are saying actually they're only doing telephone conversation, and they're doing no interaction with the public, and so now I think what we're going to be heading into is something called a direct burial or a direct cremation, where there is no mourners, no family, no bereaved, no one, not even an imam or priest. I mean, that's the bleakest. I mean, today then I heard something else that, if the military steps in, that we won't even be doing that. It'll just the military, military officials who'll be taking that over. So I'm not really, I don't like saying I don't know, but I have to say I don't know what's going to go on. But we are just literally changing our service
Hasina,
day by day.
There's nothing wrong in saying we don't know, because we're in a crisis situation and things are changing every hour, every 30 minutes. So that's why information is so valuable and important now, that we stay up to date. And especially for us to be thinking in this line, it's so important, because it's helping us to think about these kind of problems, then start looking at solutions. I mean, already in my head, things are being played.
I mean, tomorrow you probably, I can't say it for GDP, but you probably know this person. But we're doing his burial tomorrow, and so I've suggested two things. One is live streaming the funeral, so then his community. Not his blood relatives. Obviously, I've suggested only blood relatives up to 20 people, and then we're going to stagger the actual service, so 5 people come at a time. So we're still fulfilling the five people, policy.
Yeah.
And then videoing the whole event. So if there is a cut in the live streaming because we've got poor internet or whatever, and so that means that his actual funeral will still be documented and will still be able to be experienced by other, his rest of his community.
Wow, that's amazing. So you see, difficult circumstances, we're finding different types of solutions in that. And what was playing in my head when we were talking about washing the dead bodies and the tayammum, surely I was thinking, well, people really don't need to be touching the body. They could be putting the water on, or they could be spraying the water on. So I'm just thinking maybe we just need to do a lot of thinking around the solutions as well, because I don't think the authorities have those answers. I think we need to be giving them those answers so that they are informed, and then they can make those kind of decisions in that. Yeah.
And you know what? Sorry, I just have to say, it's so important that we do not see the dead as someone they're some awful person, or they're like disgusting. I just like that. Just really, really, winds me up. And I think there is this hysteria that's going on. Oh yeah, they died from this. Well, a lot of people die from lots of things. We can't start to do this. Under Islam, we actually have like the best. Because I work with so many faiths, and Halima might not be very proud of me say this, but we actually have the best protocol when it comes to dealing with the dead, because we believe in the soul, and therefore the way we are towards the dead is actually like that. We've already got all this protocol lined out, that we have to be calm, we have to be collective, we have to be compassionate. We understand that they can actually sense what we say, so we have to have great adab. We have to have great manners in front of them, rather than if they can.
Sorry, that's me.
Yeah. Okay, no worries. All good. So even our thought forms, if we start having like bad thought forms, that we think that that person is disgusting, or this or that, we have to constantly check ourselves and realign ourselves to see the best in them, to see the maybe this is too much what I'm going into, but yeah, I mean, I'm just sort of, and then part of our work is how do we then ignite people, rebalance people, so they see the best in this person, that that there's
Hasina,
nothing actually.
You've actually hit a very, very important point here, and I think this is why these kind of discussions are so important, because now people are going to start thinking about this. You've helped us to think in different way, because unless we think proactively, we're not going to find those solutions. Yeah, and it's not. We shouldn't wait for the car crash to happen for us to then find a solution later on. I think we're in a bit of a crisis at the moment, and what's happening through that, as human beings, we will be able to come up with solutions, and it's going to be a big learning curve. And I'm aware, a lot of people knew that this was coming. A lot of people knew. Some people predicted this about 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's just the government wasn't ready. So what I would like to do now is move on to our main discussion, which is, is social distancing working? Social isolation, is that helping? Is it effective? I want to go into that, and I know you're also very busy, Hasina. So if you feel free to contribute, and when you feel you need to actually kind of like take departure, then feel free to do so as well. But I just want to open up the discussion now. Before you leave, do you think people are taking the advice, and why not? What can the government do to actually stop these people, doing what they're doing now?
I think some people are taking the advice, and some people, I think there's a real big split. But again, I see a lot of people out. Yesterday, I went for a walk in our local park, and I have to say, it's never been packed so much. It was like there was some festival going on there. So, but then I think people are so bored staying at home, they have to find ways of exercising, getting out into fresh air. But then this morning I went out, and I noticed that people were walking, 3 meters apart, for example. So, they can go out, but long as they exercise a 3-meter rule, or 2-meter rule actually, but they were running, so they were like definitely 3 meters apart. So I think it's slowly starting to, because ultimately, what we're talking about here is a change in behavior, and we're not used to not being close as a human being. We're used to being close. That's who we are through and through. And now we've got all this set of, because of this crisis going on, and this condition, we're now told to, isolate, to do all the things that we are not allowed to do. So it's like we need a chance to change that habit and talk about it and say what's going to go in place, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, because, it's a complete change of habit. And that's why I think I don't think people are doing it deliberately. We're just not used to it.
Some people are not serious. I can tell some people are not serious. It took me a long time to persuade some people. It's only 3-4 days ago that suddenly the light bulbs popped a little bit in their head. Let's come to Halima. Halima, what's your take on this? Why are people not listening? Yeah, what can we do? I mean, it's such a serious, invisible enemy to humanity. Yeah? And everyone, the scientists, everyone saying, look, we don't have the cure for this. We don't have, but why are people going out and they're still, and not only that, they're putting it on social media and celebrating it.
Yeah, look, it's really difficult, right? So suddenly we're asking everybody to start changing their attitude, norms and behaviors and lifestyle choices that they've made forever. And actually, you don't change that overnight. But having said that, I think it's really important that those of us who have any influence, each of us is a highly networked individual with influence with each other. Because if we simply wait for government to give us that guidance, governments, as we know, are a little bit delayed. Often they have to balance too many factors. So you always have to assume that you have to be ahead of government guidance. With that in mind, I mean, I think about how we respond to government guidance in other situations. Sometimes we are quite critical of government. So I'd quite like to see our challenging, critical, questioning way of operating emerge, because unless we do that, we won't be able to protect ourselves because we rely on top-down interventions. So why aren't we doing that? Well, I can see lots of people trying to do the right thing, but if you are also receiving quite conflicting messages, and quite often I think the guidance has been conflicting, it's quite difficult then to get everybody to pull together. I think the idea is that we're trying to get everybody to pull together. I've had to go quite draconian with my family, for example. That's not like me. I had to, adjust the way I behave at home. So my regular business as usual personality is to be quite laissez-faire, be a little bit more kind of, riskier in terms of how I behave. But of course, those of us who work in crisis and contingency planning know that if a crisis hits, you can't just behave as normal. So I do think that it's going to fall on us as a community to want more from our own communities and actually exercise the influence that we have on each other, because government quite rightly is trying to do the right thing, but they will always be delayed. It's really, really important that each of us thinks about 6 degrees separation and start asserting that message out there. And ultimately, Abjol, I believe that people listen to their peers. I mean, often they will listen to a leader, but we live in a world where there are different forms of leadership.
That's
so
right.
We need to exercise leadership within ourselves and not constantly wait for our leaders to guide us. I think they are as confused as we are. So we just need to be a little bit more responsible. But like I said, it's really hard to change attitudes, norms and behaviors. If you think about smoking, for example, and how long it takes, even when the science is in your face, to change your attitudes and behaviors. And that's why I think we really need to pull together quite hard collectively to get that behavior change. As I said, I'm sitting in Denmark. It's 2 weeks of social distancing for us. Some of it must be cultural, I'm thinking, because as a nation, there are 6 million people in Denmark. They didn't have the same number of cases.
Halima, we'll come to Denmark soon. Let me just quickly read out some messages. Brother Abjol Miah, he's saying it's very important that the entire Muslim community with the Jewish community need to work together. So once again, I think there's similar sentiment out there that, joining all the communities together in responding, because obviously we have shared needs in that. Alio is thanking the sisters for your contribution. Ahad is also mentioning that things are changing every single day. So there's new approach every day. As people who are isolated, who are trying their best to take this kind of seriously, how do we deal with the information? I mean, every day there's a new information coming out. Do you think the government needs to do a crackdown and zero tolerance and say, look, no one's coming out no more? And is that viable for our communities?
Do you want me to go?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Go.
So I think once again we're looking to government for guidance and direction and leadership, when it needs to be more of a kind of shared leadership approach. So if government were to crack down on social behaviors, you'll get somebody who will say, well, we are a democracy, so we actually don't get told by our governments what we do. We're not Singapore, in fact, so we're not going to have applications in our living room monitoring us and so on. So ultimately, I think it does need to be a shared view of risk. So yes, government needs to be more timely. I personally think government has actually been quite behind the curve. If we had encouraged people to work from home more regularly and to start practicing social distancing about a week ago, I think people would have had that time to adjust, really. So I think they've been slow. But right now, I think we should assume that risk averse is safer than actually trying to change the guidelines each way. Ultimately, we know that we're in here for the longer haul, and we need to do everything possible. It's really, really hard to change habits. South Korea, for example, a different model altogether. They responded quite early with very measured responses. So if you start early with small measures, people can cope with that change. But if you don't have a measured response in place that is staggered, and then you ask people for a crackdown, I'm afraid you're going to actually disrupt people's comfort zones, and people don't respond well to panic. So ultimately, there's something cultural, I think, in the way that we take advice and how we respond. I do think we need to have more confidence in our community to exercise more influence on each other, because otherwise we still keep looking to government for guidance, and I think we all need to tell each other to be safe, whether it's 2 meters, whether it's 3 meters. But ultimately, it's not about self-isolation and panic. It's about physical distancing and creating more and more solidarity. So it's really important that we don't actually hide away because suddenly we're not supposed to leave. I'm really keen that we actually reach out to more people during this isolation period using digital means or the phone and other ways.
I'm hoping we're going to be doing that. So let's come to Hasina. The government, the UK government, had plenty of time because it happened somewhere else. We had a chance to look at what was happening in China. Then it came to Europe. Do you think our government's been too laid back on this? Were they just like the public thinking, well, hold on, it's not going to affect that much? Because obviously we can't blame the public because the public, they're people, of certain social behavior and that. And I know there was panic buying and there's all these, and some of it's quite natural. Who wouldn't panic buy? Because obviously if the government's not giving you, good advice in the sense of what the problem is, how long it's going to be, what the timescales are, people are going to think about themselves. They're going to think about their families. They're going to think about their next door neighbors. So people went out and started buying more items than what they need, sometimes for their neighbors, sometimes for their extended family members, and it created that rush. I know the government was very keen to make sure their strategy was effective with NHS, but they haven't communicated to the business community. They haven't communicated to the other sectors of the other partners that the government need to utilize in order to function, especially in a crisis situation. Do you think some blame lies on the government? Hasina?
I prefer to use the word responsibility. I think, like at the UK government level, they knew what was happening in China well over a month ago. And it was breaking out even earlier, late last year. So it was already, that information was coming out. And I think it's like maybe because we're an island and we just want to bury it ourselves in our head that it wasn't going to. I don't know. I just feel like that we're almost like untouchable. It wasn't going to affect us, and we are so late in terms of responding, and I think we're almost like because I know people in France, for example, they're in their second week of lockdown, and it's made such a difference. It's just really calmed the virus down, and that's what I'm not a virus specialist. That's not my forte or anything, but just working in the community and finding out what's going on, that we have been very late. But I agree. I actually completely 100% agree with Halima on this, is that really as a community we now need to act and not rely on the government for. I mean, obviously the government's coming out with information, but in terms of to be there for each other and support each other, like mainly through digitally. I mean, yesterday I had like an amazing digital experience that I don't normally have while I was working all day. So I was thought, okay, I'm going to embrace this, and it's ways of just really just reaching out and just speaking more, connecting phone. And we may be socially isolated within our homes and stuff like that, but we have, I was actually saying this to my colleague earlier on today, that without the phone, we would not be able to do the things we can do. And it's not just phone, the phone, the technology behind it. So we must use that. We must contact each other, and even like when you were talking about the panic buying thing, there's community groups that have set up just ad hoc. No one's funding it. No one's doing anything. People have come together street by street and wanting to find out how they can support people like myself or people who work in the NHS, make sure they have a meal. So even my street, we're saying, okay, we're going to have these pre-cooked meals. When somebody wants a meal, we go and just put it on their doorstep. They don't have to know us. They don't have to do anything, but that's just a tiny small thing. So what I would like to say, that any of you who've got like ample amounts of food, start making foods up, put them into like, freeze it, have it all ready for other people, because they are going to need it. They're not going to, the people are, like myself, we're like literally just working 24 hours, probably 5-6 hours of sleep, and then just getting back onto it, because that is what it's going to be like until things calm down.
Well, Hasina, just to let you know, yeah, I mean, I think we should move on to talking about how the communities have been responding, and that is fantastic. I know there's loads of community groups out there have taken proactive action. I know some of the charity organisations. I know one particular charity organisation that's very much grassroots that I'm involved with, Human Aid UK. They operate in various different war-torn countries for victims of people oppressed and victims of war, and as an organization, they have to go onto a close down because they can't function as like everyone else. So all their staff members, everyone's working from home. They had to re-strategize in how they're going to be responding. And now they have two moral dilemmas. One is that they're all the donors that they're supporting in various different countries are now also going to be impacted by it, because the right hand that feeds them and supports them are going to be paralyzed in the UK, because a big chunk of our aid money actually supports a lot of good work around the country. We have fantastic charity organizations that are doing that, yeah. And also now the coronavirus isn't just in the UK and Europe, it's also going into Syria, it's going into other places. Today there's a case of two victims in Gaza itself. So can you imagine people having those kind of problems with all the general problems that they have with poverty and destructions around them? Now they've got this another hidden enemy there as well. So the charity organization decided, okay, fine, we're doing all this stuff over there. What can we do for the UK? And they come up with a very good idea. What they're trying to do now is make an appeal to the wider community, raise money from people online, and they made a partnership with Royal London Hospital. So what they're saying now is we would look after the frontline staff members at Royal London Hospital, because they're struggling, because they're doing shift after shift. Some of them are not eating properly. They're not coming out of the hospital to be able to get their breaks and that. So straight away, someone from the organization contacted them, and they were so happy. It's unbelievable. They were just like, wow, this is, and one of our staff members said, look, we're your neighbor. We're a charity organization based on Whitechapel, and we know you are the frontline service. We know what you're going through, because we deal with this kind of issues regularly when we're doing aid work abroad. Now we want to help, and this is how we can help. And obviously there were some issues around how do we get our volunteers to go there, give them the food, give them the supplies. And I've got to say, we've come to a very good solution. And now that this is already happening. So an appeal is going to be going out very soon to get more volunteers, so that they don't break the protocol, they maintain the protocol. There are different departments, there's allocation, there's staff members inside the hospital who will receive the food packs and that and the essentials that they need. But we've got to think like this. And if community organizations out there go out there, start doing it, there's many different charity organizations out there, pressure groups out there. If we look up, I know the government yesterday at the press conference, they said, well, the voluntary sector has got to be involved now. We will need their help. They're going to be creating hubs, and people should come forward. Now, in one sense, people want to help, but then on the other sense, we've got this restriction and the fear of catching this. How can we help our communities to become proactive and help? Because we've got that consciousness. We just want to help. I don't want to stay at home and not do anything. I want to do something. That's why we're online trying to communicate with everyone. You're here sacrificing your time, but now people want to do some practical stuff. What suggestions can you give in your field and in your understanding, people in maybe other good projects people can do and where their gaps are? Maybe we can discuss a little bit more on that line now as well.
Is it all right if I go? Because I probably only have got another 5 minutes or so.
No problem. You go first.
I think definitely, I'm all for helping all the big charities, but, start at home, start on your street, start with your neighbor, find out, for example, I mean, this is all, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but find out if there's any elderly people who are living on their own. Drop in a note to them, just handwritten note. And look, some people, elderly people, we forget, we totally forget how easily we communicate with each other. Some people don't even know how to text. We've got to remember there's people out there who don't know how to text. They don't even have a mobile phone. So it's like, start seeing what the gaps are just on your street, and then find out if there's things organized and get involved in it if you can. I mean, I've had to say to my local voluntary group that I actually can't get personally involved, but there's members in my family, they're involved in cooking and making sure the distribution. So start there. And I think, if we all look after our own community, immediate community, like on literally our neighbors, 5 doors each, opposite either way, and on our road, that is such a big change. We can do that. That's a big change that we can make. And then if you have much more resources, then look at contributing. Look, if you can't do it physically, definitely financially, and also find ways to get involved with homeless organizations.
I was going to say that.
Our funeral home, we're right next to a shelter, so we just make sure that it might not be a lot, but even just to give fruit, because and find out what is it they want. A lot of people, let's not assume they want all this stuff. Just ask them what they want. So they want things like fruit, warm clothing, and toiletries. So again, just going back to basics, asking people, speaking to, I know not like speak to them, but social distance, speaking to them if you can. Even if it's through text messaging, just keep in contact with people, finding out if they're all right. Even if they're funny, when I mean funny, if they're so angry or upset with you, I just say to myself or my staff, do you know what? Let's just like not give too much attention. Just carry on going. I just don't stop contacting somebody. If someone's blunt with me, I just carry on. I just think, maybe they're not having a good time, because my intention is good. And that's how we are. We all have good intentions, and we've got to use our love in our heart to connect with each other. And just keep it going all the time, no matter what. Even if we're feeling down, we just make an intention, right? 5 minutes, I'm going to make that text. I'm going to do this call. I'm going to do that. Because, we can still ring up and call, and then we can do like this. There's so many ways of communicating.
Haseena, Jazakallah, fantastic, inspirational, and a role model for us in the community as well. Your vital words and opinions will echo online, inshallah. More people will see us, and probably they will also become proactive, and that's what we want to see, inshallah. I know you're going to have to leave very shortly, but we still got Sister Halima with us, and we can continue our discussion regarding the community response and contribution, and how the community can get involved. I mean, is there a need of coordination? We've got so many of these masjids that closed now. I mean, could we use some of these masjids for some of the homeless people?
Brilliant.
So we've got to look at these kind of issues, because at times of crisis, we need to look at ways of opening doors. I know, it's difficult because we need to understand the disease. We need to understand the problem of that nature. But you've got humanity on one side and safety on the other side. We just have to find a way how we can bring them together in the safest way. There could be a lot of resources out there that we haven't utilized. There's a lot of strength in the community, I know, and we just need to be drawing that energy out. Halima, what do you think?
Is it okay if I say goodbye here and salam alaikum?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And all the best with everything.
Thank you.
Speak soon, inshallah. Okay. All the best.
Yeah.
Halima?
Yeah, no, thanks, Abjol. You always know a woman who's very active when she needs to leave to manage a very important part of the compassionate services industry. So I'm really pleased that she's able to do that. So I'm going to try a different tact at the moment. So you and I both have worked overseas. We work in a lot of uncertain situations and environments where there's a greater level of risk and uncertainty. And what I'm beginning to conclude, Abjol, is that is the norm now. So we need to think about those of us who might have worked in quite insecure environments where it's quite uncertain, and what are the better ways of working that we can bring back to our own business planning at the moment. Now, one of the first principles that I've always applied in disaster planning is do no harm. If you're going to do nothing else, do no harm.
Yes,
so always think
totally
about
agree.
Do you know what I mean? Think about your action. While we might all lunge to do the right thing because we're so desperate to do some good, do some public support and so on. But the first rule is do no harm. Once you get past that threshold, you can actually think about doing some benefit. And there are lots of different ways that we can benefit and support each other. I have been completely wowed by the number of mutual support groups that have sprung up in Tower Hamlets, in Newham, in Haringey, in Hackney, and everywhere. And actually communities are sat there thinking, right, we're not going to create more panic, more anxiety. We are going to draw on our internal resources to think about how we respond together and collectively, because this is going to be very, very difficult. What's not helping, I think, is all of the communication that is false and not fact-based and not science-led, because I think we can create more and more panic within ourselves. Now, I say this in a challenging tone because I'm in a different country where they've gone to lockdown or semi-lockdown because their airports are still open about 2 weeks ago. Now, if you go to a supermarket, it is very calm. You can buy everything that you want to. I think I saw some panic on the first day when they announced it. So it is possible to regulate our behavior so that there's more for us all later. And I think we must all understand that. If we don't do that, we are going to make this crisis a lot worse. And although we need to think more locally, it's also important to think that this is a pandemic, right? This isn't an epidemic. An epidemic is something that's local and in one country. Yeah. And if it is a pandemic, we need to think about all of the communication messages that we have. I know for sure my parents and my family have quite direct connections with villages in Bangladesh, for example, and that there's a regular communication going on between my family and about 5 other families in a very remote part of Bangladesh where health systems are quite weak. Communication is probably not as transparent as it could be. And even if they had all the best intentions, they can't reach. So I think it's really, really important that we reach out to all of our communities, wherever they may be. They may be in Whitechapel or Shadwell, but equally they may well be in Shiramishu or Jagannathpur or wherever your home villages are. Or it could be that we have other communities that we've located elsewhere in parts of London, parts of the UK. So I think we need to think a little bit more than local as well, because otherwise we're simply containing what we think is an issue in East London when in fact it's a pandemic.
It is. Halima, just hold those thoughts together because it's very important. I don't know if everyone is aware, our Prime Minister is going to be going live on 10 Downing Street for him to give his speech or press conference. That's going to be at 8:30. So what we will do, soon as he comes on, we will go to him straight away so we can listen to our Prime Minister, because obviously that's a pinnacle point where information is going to be provided. And obviously, we will need to think through the message. I'm assuming, okay, and maybe we can speculate, he's going to be bringing some new legislations or laws to kind of like stop people from coming out. So I'm thinking he's probably going to be a little bit more harder. Well, what do you say, Halima? What do you think he's going to be saying? Okay, Halima, I think we can't hear you at the moment.
Oh, sorry. I'm used to remote working so often that I often put the mute button on so that you could hear me better.
That's right. That's okay. That's good. You're on now.
I think he's likely to announce more measures that actually get us to comply with social distancing and physical distancing. It's not a bad thing, because actually, if we can't be relied upon to do that, it's really important that this is sort of directed from above. That would create more of an incentive for us to stay at home. That would be fantastic, I think, because the UK is not in the same situation like a country such as Denmark, which has 6 million people. So I think it's really important that social distancing, physical distancing is enforced in some way. So that will certainly come. I'm also hoping, Abjol, that there's more support from the government on the economic front, because we've actually announced social safety nets for families who would be distressed financially. But there are actually other parts of the economic rescue package that hasn't really gone far enough. So think about South Asian communities, Muslim communities. We actually have large numbers of people who are self-employed, whether they are shopkeepers, whether they're driving Ubers and minicabs. And I think we've actually been not generous enough with that support. So I'm hoping that there'll be more support for the self-employed announced, more support in terms of how we're helping those that are homeless and those that are more vulnerable, that actually can't draw on these mechanisms that some of us can. So although government is doing a good thing, it's the necessary measure in order to get us all to recover. How are we doing for time? Because I know that
we're okay. I think we're okay with time, and I think what we'll do, we'll watch part of his speech, and then maybe we can come back and analyze what he have said if he is putting those measures in place. how realistic is it going to be? Because I know even when he suggested that the pub should be closed, the pubs didn't close. So I think he's probably got some regulations to actually enforce that. I agree with you. I think this coronavirus is very dangerous, and it's going to attack the most vulnerable and the people who've got certain conditions as well. And just because I think I'm a healthy, strong person, I cycle and I do all the physical activities and that I'm immune from it, maybe that's very selfish, because I think I could be a carrier. If I'm a carrier and I pass it on to someone else, I'm actually going to be responsible for someone else's death. So we as a society, we need to think through this and also do our best not to be the problem, like you said. And I think not being the problem is also very difficult for people. If people need to realize that, look, it's not just for your own protection as well, it's for other people's protection. And I come from a martial art background. We do boxing, kickboxing, and we don't wear the glove for our own protection. We wear the glove for the protection of the person that we're going to be sparring with. Yeah. So sometimes you have to understand it, that our way of life will have to change. We have to change because this is not a normal circumstances. If I knew something bad was going to happen to me and I had to hide somewhere, give example during the Second World War, and I knew that I would be killed, and I had to hide in a cellar, and I will have to be quiet for hours and hours to save my life. I'll do that, because I know my life is at risk. And here, our lives are at risk, and if not, we're going to be putting other people in danger and in harm's way. So it's a collective approach, and I think the community organizations out there have done the best, and we have to thank all the faith organizations out there who've actually taken the decision to close the masjids and that, and I'm sure the synagogues and other church places are also, and also other public places have closed down. Some people have kept them open, even within the Muslim community, few masjids stayed open. But obviously there's been a lot of debates and a lot of fatwas being given from very high level scholars and that, saying, look, this is actually Islamic now to socially distance yourself, because this is what Umar radiallahu anhu did as well. He actually went to one place and there was a disease there, and he turned and he moved away from that area. We have to think about the benefit of everyone. We also have to think about the victims, people who are going to be suffering, and we have to look at solutions that are going to be measured and effective, and also making sure that some measures are not knee-jerk reaction and it kind of upsets people as well. Do you think some of these measures may result in social unrest? Because obviously most of the streets are kind of empty. Last couple of days we've had some antisocial activities in that, where some minor criminals have been taking advantage, but not to a very, very big scale. But do you think sooner or later we have to start thinking about how we can, I got some messages that a lot of the local community groups are going around trying to protect some areas from intruders coming into those areas and mugging local people in some of the cash point machines and that, yeah? Are we going to see a little bit more, local communities taking responsibility in their hands? And how do we contain and measure and balance it all out?
I think that's probably a minor concern compared with the efforts required to social distance ourselves. And although that is a risk, I think there's been a really good effort on social media from the police and from the community to say, look, there are some people who might actually be pretending to be doing some NHS testing and trying to access our homes. So I think the quicker we are to kind of like nip that in the bud, the better, so that we can all then focus on what is necessary. I wanted to come back, Abjol, to the point about the mosques. I keep coming back to this point around the need for leadership to come from within. Now, if you remember, about last weekend in Malaysia, Malaysia had probably just 2 cases of suspected coronavirus scenarios. And then they had a large gathering in a mosque over the weekend. That number climbed to 1,000 cases. The Malaysian government, the PM, tried very hard to try and get all of the mosques to close down. But it's a decentralized country, so you have to get 9 provinces to get together to agree. But they did it. And most of the worshippers of that particular weekend event had come from Indonesia and Borneo. So it's not really about thinking, okay, act local and responsive. You actually have to think about borders as well. I suspect that members of our community respond to different forms of leadership. My father, for example, he's more likely to listen to leaders in a mosque than he is to a health professional, for different reasons. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but where the leadership exists, I think we need to exert that influence back on our communities. I would love it if faith leaders actually coordinated better. Somebody made a suggestion that if Muslim groups and Jewish groups got together, what could they be doing to collectively lobby government? I think that would be a wonderful effort, collective effort, because government, as you were saying, is firefighting. The most they can do is respond in a homogenous manner, and even that they're quite behind with. But what can we do to step into that space and actually get government to respond? So I think it's really important that Jewish groups and Muslim groups organize together in order to get more service satisfaction or more from our governments that we haven't had before. Now, it's not a criticism on government, because I ultimately want a government to be functioning. You know, I do not want to paralyze our government, but I would prefer the government to stay functioning but do more. I would prefer the armed forces and the police to do their part. I would prefer those of us who have expertise within our communities to use that knowledge and advice to get government to be more responsive. So I think it'd be really important maybe within your networks and faith leaders to come together to actually think about their influences and what more can be done with our audiences.
Well, I can guarantee you I will do my best to get a rabbi or someone from the Jewish community on board very soon. I'm going to try and get some people from other faith backgrounds as well. I think we need to use these kind of platforms to get the leaders on board, generate these kind of ideas and kind of like share those ideas so that people can go and be positively responsive to that. I think we're coming, we've got 1 more minute before our Prime Minister comes forth to address the nation. We will kind of wait. Suddenly we will go off air. We will watch him, and then we will come back hopefully. Yeah. So in the meantime, we can still continue until you know that happens. I know you come from the humanitarian background. What kind of impact do you think is going to have on all the charity work people having? And I also totally agree. We have responsibility in the UK, and that's why all the charity organisations now looking at how they can contribute. And there is some sort of coordination taking place. That look, we as big charity organisations, small charity organisations, we have loads of volunteers. Let's put them into good use, and let's help. And essentially, they're targeting the frontline services, because at the moment, if the frontline services collapses, then obviously our first line of defence collapses as well. And then you've got the elderly people. I'm getting information that we may be closer to going off air. Here we go. Let's go.
And I want to begin by reminding you why the UK has been taking the approach that we have. Without a huge national effort to halt the growth of this virus, there will come a moment when no health service in the world could possibly cope, because there won't be enough ventilators, enough intensive care beds, enough doctors and nurses. And as we've seen elsewhere in other countries that also have fantastic healthcare systems, that is the moment of real danger. To put it simply, if too many people become seriously unwell at one time, the NHS will be unable to handle it, meaning more people are likely to die, not just from coronavirus, but from other illnesses as well. So it's vital to slow the spread of the disease, because that is the way we reduce the number of people needing hospital treatment at any one time, so we can protect the NHS's ability to cope and save more lives. And that's why we've been asking people to stay at home during this pandemic. And though huge numbers are complying, and I thank you all, the time has now come for us all to do more. From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home, because the critical thing we must do to stop the disease spreading between households. That is why people will only be allowed to leave their home for the following very limited purposes. Shopping for basic necessities as infrequently as possible. One form of exercise a day, for example, a run, walk or cycle, alone or with members of your household. Any medical need to provide care or to help a vulnerable person, and travelling to and from work, but only where this is absolutely necessary and cannot be done from home. That's all. These are the only reasons you should leave your home. You should not be meeting friends. If your friends ask you to meet, you should say no. You should not be meeting family members
Sure, we
who
lost
live in
sound.
your home. You should not be going shopping except for essentials like food
From
and
the
medicine.
screen, Abjol.
And you should do this as little as you
Okay,
can.
come back now.
And use food delivery services where you can. If you don't follow the rules, the police will have the powers to enforce them, including through fines and dispersing gatherings.
Fine.
To ensure compliance with the government's instruction to stay at home, we will immediately close all shops selling non-essential goods, including clothing and electronic stores, and other premises, including libraries, playgrounds and outdoor gyms and places of worship. We'll stop all gatherings of more than 2 people in public, excluding people you live with. And we'll stop all social events, including weddings, baptisms and other ceremonies, but excluding funerals. Parks will remain open for exercise, but gatherings will be dispersed. No Prime Minister wants to enact measures like this. I know the damage that this disruption is doing and will do to people's lives, to their businesses and to their jobs. And that's why we've produced a huge and unprecedented programme of support both for workers and for business. And I can assure you that we will keep these restrictions under constant review. We will look again in 3 weeks and relax them if the evidence shows we are able to. But at present, there are just no easy options. The way ahead is hard, and it is still true that many lives will, sadly, be lost. And yet it is also true that there is a clear way through. Day by day, we are strengthening our amazing NHS with 7,500 former clinicians now coming back to the service. With the time you buy by simply staying at home, we are increasing our stocks of equipment. We are accelerating our search for treatments. We're pioneering work on a vaccine. And we are buying millions of testing kits that will enable us to turn the tide on this invisible killer. I want to thank everyone who is working flat out to beat the virus. Everyone from the supermarket staff to the transport workers to the carers to the nurses and doctors on the front line. But in this fight, we can be in no doubt that each and every one of us is directly enlisted. Each and every one of us is now obliged to join together to halt the spread of this disease, to protect our NHS and to save many, many thousands of lives. And I know that as they have in the past, so many times, the people of this country will rise to that challenge and we will come through it stronger than ever. We will beat the coronavirus and we will beat it together. And therefore, I urge you at this moment of national emergency to stay at home, protect our NHS and save lives. Thank you.
Save life, protect our NHS, stay home. What's your take, Halima?
Very reassuring to hear that, stay at home. I think the Prime Minister, our leadership need to reinforce that message if it is unclear at all. I was very pleased to hear that I just wrote it down. So parks will remain open, but gatherings of more than 2 will not be allowed. I think that's really important because at the moment, if you haven't stopped the parks, what are the messages that we're sending? So they have actually moved ahead to say we are restricting gatherings of 2. I think overall it's actually a reassuring message.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything about border announcements, so that's interesting. So that's probably staggered.
Yeah.
But again, Abjol, I mean, I'm kind of balancing the long term and the medium term and the short term. So on the short term, we're all thinking about social distancing. So I think this message was all about social distancing, and that was very good. However, I do think there's more that can be done on the economic front, as I've said. But the one thing that's really missing from the UK government and actually other governments, as he said, it doesn't really matter how well we respond. Our health system's capacity isn't really up for the job. So I would urge everybody to start lobbying government to think about increasing our health system capability, because during December we heard, I mean, we regularly struggle with winter fuel and seasonal flu, for example, and we already knew that the NHS was stretched. We also know that the size of the private healthcare industry in the UK is quite small because we've always had a fantastic NHS. So if the NHS is stretched already under business as usual conditions, what on earth is it going to do if those numbers of cases increase? So I think it's really important that we actually think a little bit outside the box, and how do we ramp up health system capability? Every country will need to do that. And that message hasn't quite trickled down for me yet. And I suspect...
Halima, just quickly, I just want to thank everyone who's been following us. Please, obviously you heard what the Prime Minister has said. You can call us. We have the number shown. Call us. You can directly give you a point of view. You can also highlight areas that you think are still concerning. So yeah, please, if the opportunity is there, it's an opportunity for you to share your views now as well. I was also very impressed when it came to the social restriction side of things, and I think it was about time, a little bit late, but it's they're timing it according to their strategy. They probably know certain things that we don't know at the moment, so they're planning it in that particular way. What was interesting is that faith was mentioned, faith institution was mentioned in there as well, to close those down, because initially there was no mention of any of the faith institutions, like normal public places closed down, but now there was more specific kind of like wording was provided. And also, Halima, like we love our weddings, don't we? we love our weddings, and it's already loads of weddings are actually counselling, people are rethinking, and rightly so, because obviously now that the Prime Minister has said this has become quite serious. A lot of people are trying to get their deposit backs and make sure that they don't lose out on that. You were mentioning about the economics, and also somewhere in the line that the borders, explain a little bit more of that as well.
So when I'm thinking about actions and responses, I'm thinking there's a whole bucket around social distancing. There's a whole bucket around the economic front. There's a whole bucket around how we support the NHS to respond. And then there's a whole bucket around whether you keep the airports open or shut, or whether trade links are open and shut. So in Denmark, for example, I only use this as a practical example, not because the UK is similar, but in Denmark, they've announced all of these social distancing measures already. So we've had that for 2 weeks. But what they've said about the airports is that only Danish citizens who have a valid reason to be in Denmark can keep using the airport. So if, for example, you're a tourist or somebody doesn't have any business to be in Denmark, you should probably leave and not come back. That hasn't really happened in the UK yet.
Now, it's obviously a very...
Yeah, well, think about it. I mean, who actually travels through Denmark compared to Heathrow, right? Mm. So in terms of the major international hub, I think that's actually quite a big measure, and it's one that we might need to come to. But the UK public is very different from the Italian public, the Spanish public, or the Danish public. We actually find it quite hard to be told what to do. Maybe it's because our confidence in our government hasn't always been so high. That said, I thought that was a very reassuring message. I thought that was a very measured message and very timely. And I think we need to see more of it. We must always try and appreciate that government guidance might be 3 days behind. So for example, if the situation changes over the next few days, I imagine that we need to be looking at borders and travel restrictions. We need to be thinking about whether the announcement of 7,000 retired health care professionals is enough, whether simply thinking about the number of ventilators or testing kits is enough. Do you know what I mean? Because this is physical infrastructure.
There was no mention about utilizing volunteers and how that could be practical.
Exactly. So there's a whole range of other measures that could be hauled in, I think, and that's the kind of measures that you would introduce if you were thinking about war footing, for example, but not actually being at war. So how is it that you use the armed forces and the police is not to monitor staff and citizens, but actually to think about the collective effort? And it's very unclear to me whether we will go that way. But certainly if you think about South Korea, for example, I mean, they've brought in measures quite early, but they were also quite good at introducing technology in homes to actually do the job of healthcare professionals. They also paid for that technology. So each app and the wired broadband, that wasn't free for everybody, but somewhere along the way, being so wired with technology helped them. So it's very different. And I imagine that although this was a very statesmanly message from the Prime Minister, and it will be very reassuring, it's still within that bucket of social distancing. We also had a few economic measures announced about 2 or 3 days ago. That didn't go far enough to protect the self-employed, in my opinion. But we are not talking about the capacity of the health system to ramp up. Now, I'm not saying that China did exceptionally well, but if you recall, they did have to think about ramping up their physical infrastructure quite quickly. So I'm actually thinking about the scale of our response and how quickly you might have to think about those hospitals. And that conversation hasn't really taken place yet. Certainly not in the UK, certainly not in Italy, certainly not in Spain, but I think we will need to go there.
Okay, very quickly, do you think fines are going to deter people from, breaking this simple, suggestion?
I don't think so, because I think the Brits don't like to be told what to do. I think it's going to have to come from mutual respect and a sense of care and compassion. And that is why I think we need to find our own influences to say, look, talk to everybody that you know.
I think he was very careful. So he gave some alleyway as well, you can go for a cycle run on your own, 2 people, exercise once a day. So I think, still bringing in those elements, because obviously it is a challenge for people to be at home. Many people with families and kids, people need exercises. So, so I'm still wondering and thinking, so if someone broke those rules, what will happen to them? Because, I know as a charity aid worker, I'm going to have to go and help and support my charity organization in delivering, items and food to the NHS as well. Am I going to get stopped? So now these things are now playing in my head. So what would your advice be to charity organizations who want to contribute? How can they go? How can they really contribute? I mean, obviously they have to think about their own protection as well, and they also have to think about not harming other people as well. So there's this fine balance that they have to do. I know my charity organization really wants to play its role, but with this new announcement now, obviously. I think they're still brave. They're still going to go out and do that stuff. But I'm just thinking, how the rest of our communities, how they're going to respond to it as well. What do you think? How do you think people will take this?
So I think organisations that are working on the front line or providing essential services such as yours, I think they will be expected to continue, because obviously without that support, then the safety, the social protection system completely collapses. So I think we shouldn't feel worried about that impacting on our work to provide frontline services and essential services. But I do think the public at large will be worried about this advice, because it's about changing a behavior overnight, and nobody is used to that. I mean, it takes a saint to change overnight. But that is why I think it's going to need, everybody at home to kind of play ball, really, because if one person listens and the other person doesn't, it doesn't quite work. So I think we're going to have to take it quite seriously. Fines, in my opinion, won't work, Abjol, because, some of the ways in which we need to respond to this pandemic is very cultural. So what is our population used to? Our population isn't used to being fined because they want to be in a public space. That, I think, will create social unrest, because it's not in our culture to restrict our movement in this way. So I don't think that should happen. I don't think it will happen. But it's very important that we don't actually put government in a place where it has to impose some fines. So that's why it's always a two-way process, isn't it? It's what you want government to do, but where's our response? And how do we make sure that government isn't boxed in a corner where they have to bring in extreme measures? I do think beyond our behaviours, there's much more to be done on increasing health systems capability. As you were saying, the volunteers, the armed forces, not because we have to panic, but that is what disaster management planning requires. And if you don't bring that in at the right, I'm a little bit concerned that we are always 5 or 6 days behind.
Halima, very quickly, obviously time is an essence, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds to summarise. We've heard what the Prime Minister had to say. Tomorrow is another day. And obviously, I now in the dark, I've got to have to cycle back to home as well. And I know when I'm cycling, it's impossible for me to maintain my 2 meters distance when other cyclists come and we come to a traffic light. So there's a lot of practical problems we're going to have to. And I mean, I've got my mask and everything, so I am wearing my mask and everything and that, yeah, as best as I can. And I'm listening to all the advices and that, and I'm also preparing, and I'm sure everyone else who's watching us are doing the same. So your last summary for today.
I think it's just to understand that there is a high degree of stress everywhere in all our lives, and because there's a high level of stress there, we also need to be our better selves. This crisis can bring out the worst in human nature or the very best. I'm erring for the very best because actually we have a protective nature in us to look after each other. So we just need to be kind, compassionate, and support each other, but equally be highly responsible for our own behaviors, be calm, be measured, and be prepared to move with advice when it comes in a timely manner. And those of us who are fit and healthy to do more for each other. And also, I mean, back to that original point around self-organizing, and the fact that we work together to get a structured outcome on Muslim burials tells you what can be achieved. Because I think it's still important that Asian communities or Muslim communities or Jewish communities are facing the impact of this pandemic in different ways. And I don't think we can wait for government to give us this guidance. We need to impress upon government some of our needs so that government can actually meet us halfway. So it's very important that we organize collectively because we know our own community needs, but the government doesn't. So we just need to make it easier to enable government to respond to our needs in a better way.
Dr. Halima, Jazakallah, thank you very much for being my guest today. And I'm sure people who've been watching us have actually benefited. It has given them a lot of thinking. Also, a lot of people will watch us later on as well. So a lot of more people will actually get to know the discussion that we had today. I'd like to thank my previous guest, Haseena. She co-founder and CEO of Compassionate Funerals, one of the female service providers there. It's really good to hear from her as well, and the impact on burial and some of those challenges as well. And once again, I'd like to thank Vodcasts for actually allowing us this platform. It's breaking our isolation. It's also helping us to connect with people online. I think that's the only medium that we have. People are able to go onto their phones and that, watch us through Facebook. So what we want to do is we want to generate discussions and ideas, and also, you know, actions. And some things we've actually taken on from today's discussion is maybe not to depend too much on the government. We have a lot of strengths within our community groups and organizations that we all belong to or have been working for many years. Let's get them to the forefront. Let's get those community organizations to shine now. Let's be proactive and let's approach those frontline services. Let's look at those projects that are working with elderly people. Let's see what kind of help and support we can provide them as well. We can all do it safely. We can maintain that distance. You know, I know yesterday we had Brother Abu Mu'min come here, and he actually went and provided food to a coronavirus victim. Okay, and he'd done it in the best way he could do with the food, left it in front of the door, made the phone call, told the person that, look, you know, the food's outside, and they came out and they picked it and they went back in again. So it can be done. We just have to look at the logistical side of things. I want to thank all the community groups out there who are doing their best in providing, and they've responded very quickly without even the government telling them what to do. All those people who are taking this advice seriously and not breaking the social distancing rules and that, because, you know, they're being considerate and they're caring for people around them and the society that they live in, because it's a shared approach now. You know, we shouldn't have that selfish element to ourselves. It's a global problem, and you know, every day is a new day for us. You know, and for some people it might not be another day. So let's just have those people in our mind. Let's just hope that everyone gets through the evening so that we have another day. People are working from home. That itself is a challenge. You know, having families around. I know many people are working from home. You know, so, you know, in the future discussions, we're going to try and look at how people are coping with their normal day-to-day life at home, being homebound. And when they do go out, you know, what kind of activities they are doing outside as well. And also technology. Has technology helped you to reconnect with your families? I know, because I'm isolated now, I'm actually calling my relatives up and talking to them. You know, all the people that I probably won't talk to before, and that is forcing me to talk to them as well. So I hope everyone who's watching this, you're probably doing this as well. There's a lot of positive things that are happening. People are finding their own solutions. A lot of people yesterday commented saying that, the first time, husbands and wives are spending more time with their families, like they're spending more time with their kids. So there's a lot of social bonding happening, and it'd be really, really interesting. I don't know if there's any academic bodies out there doing any research or anything, but you know what? This condition could be one of the best research opportunities, and I'm sure this has hit us in such a way that people weren't prepared for it. But I can see from a social anthropological perspective, people are thinking of new ways of surviving, new solutions, new problems, and new ways of thinking as well. So yes, obviously we're still in the beginning of the stage now. Things are probably going to get more serious, and what I will do is definitely come regularly. 7 o'clock, around 7 o'clock. You just have to be a little bit patient with us because we're volunteers and everyone's a volunteer here. We just want to contribute back to society, and this is a bit more of an easier mode. We don't have to pay money or anything like that to come on Skype, and obviously a lot of the TV channels are probably going to close down. So I think we've got an easy platform. Young and old, people of all different backgrounds can actually take part in this. So big thanks to everyone who took part today. Big thanks to our guests. And from me, Abjol Miah, until tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Big thanks to Vodcasts for allowing this platform. Everyone share it, everyone watch it, and spread the word. We can get through this, we'll survive, and we'll be caring and compassionate to everyone around us. We're in it together, like someone said before. Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum.